this week. Joining us now with more insights, Doug Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum President and former Director of the Congressional Budget Office. Thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. Let's focus on the financials. We now know that the new administration is asking for circa 1.9 trillion in terms of a new relief package. Now, some of that obviously has already gone out of the door, but nevertheless, we're going to hear from Janet Yellen tomorrow. We're going to start to see this process unfold over the next few days. In terms of what the new administration wants and what the new administration is going to get, how big a gap do you think we're going to see?
I think there'll be a considerable gap, and it's because the Biden administration has decided to attempt to pass this through Congress using regular order, which would require 60 votes in the Senate, which means they're going to have to go get at least 9 Republicans. And that means the package will look different. So this is an opening bid to a legislative process. I expect, Treasury Secretary Yellen to make a strong case for it, but there's some things in there that I just don't think have a chance to get through. They're not going to raise the minimum wage to $15 in the middle of a recession and damage small businesses, for example. And I think they are going to have to think hard about the scale of this proposal. You know, if you look at the data, GDP in the fourth quarter of 2020 was about 150, maybe $100 billion below 2019. Why do you need a $1.9 trillion solution to that size of a problem? So they're going to have a really hard sell job to get something like this through.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned they're not using the reconciliation program. Why do you think they are not doing that? And what does that tell us about potentially what could be coming down the pike from the Biden administration in a couple of months' time?
I think they're holding on to the option of using reconciliation for other parts of the domestic agenda, which, quite frankly, will be more contentious. There is an agreement that we have an enormous problem with the coronavirus. There's an agreement that the economy has needed some support. There's just disagreement on the scale of those things. When he moves forward to his clean energy agenda, health agenda, those kinds of items, he's going to need to really rely on just Democratic votes, most likely. And they'll hold on to reconciliation for those items.
Taxation?
Taxation can be done in reconciliation. As I understand the plans, they're going to, propose some fairly dramatic things on energy, health, and infrastructure, and they will use some of the tax proposals from the campaign, notably higher rates on affluent individuals and corporations, to offset at least some of that cost.
You talked about there being a recognition on both sides of the aisle of the fact that the American economy does need some help. It's just a question of scale of how much. The vaccine rollout looks like it's happening a little bit more slowly than anticipated. Does that increase, therefore, the view on both sides of the aisle in terms of the scale of what is needed?
Well, we just passed $900 billion out of the Congress. That's about 4% of GDP, expected to go out into the economy in the first half of 2021. So that's 8% at an annual rate. That's an enormous amount of support. So I expect both sides to be looking at the vaccine rollout. If it looks like it's ramping up and looks anything like 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days, then it's really hard to make the case for extending UI for another 6 months. You might want to do it till July. It's really hard to make the case for raising the benefit that goes with that unemployment insurance. One would expect, if the vaccine works well, that you will have the economy functioning much better by July, August, September. If it doesn't, then more support is needed for a longer period of time, and that changes the math.
Okay. So, again, we need to track the data, watch the vaccines, see how they're being rolled out and how effectively that program is going. Just kind of looking forward and thinking about where the U.S. economy is going next. It is going to need support. It is going to need a great deal of work from Congress to get it back to where it was. What do you think the model is now? How do you think bipartisanship is going to work in a Senate that is basically 50-50? What's the model? As you look back to history, is there anything that you would say worked well and this administration can use?
So first thing I would say is that the economy is not as bad as many people depict it. For example, despite the job loss in December, that came with 500,000 jobs lost in leisure and hospitality. That's a direct result of the surge in virus cases Outside of that, we continue to have job growth. No one expects fourth quarter GDP to come in with a negative number. It's going to grow somewhere between 2 and 6% probably. And with the support that was just put in place, first quarter is going to be reasonably strong. So that means you don't need these enormous packages necessarily to just keep the economy growing. And the model then is to have things that you can get through Congress. The best way to do that is for the administration to write legislation, to take the pen and say, this is what we want, to tell the American people that's what they want, send it to Congress, and at that point, Congress can begin to modify it as needed to get it through the House and the Senate, knowing that the White House ultimately will keep in the things the minority needs to have them cooperate, protect the flank of their party when they have to take unpleasant votes. And in the end, to get bipartisan legislation in Congress, the effort starts in the White House. It's the only place that can broker compromise. It's the only place that can provide political air cover for both sides to do difficult things. And so how the Biden administration approaches this is very important.
How are the Republicans positioned, the centrist Republican positioned, when it comes to the energy transformation? This is going to be a key and central plank of the incoming administration's program. And I'm wondering kind of where there is ground for movement in terms of a bipartisanship agenda that can deliver some of it and how effective that is going to be.
The House Republicans, for example, had as a common part of their reelection plank the notion that climate change was a real problem, that it had substantial impacts on the globe, and that the problem needed to be dealt with. The step they hadn't taken was to write down large-scale solutions of the type that the Biden administration is going to propose. So the gap that needs to get closed is the gap between recognition and measurement of the problem and addressing it on a large scale. I think if the Biden administration comes forward with some fairly efficient policies that have minimal economic disruption as they get ramped up, they'll get cooperation. If they come in with something that looks to be a bridge too far in terms of negative impact on the economy, I think they'll start to have some trouble. And so I'm quite interested to see how they do this, because they have finally gotten to a point where they've got both parties on the "we have a problem" page. Now we have to get them on the same solution page.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. It's interesting, the reports coming out of D.C. today suggesting one of the first things that President Biden would do would be to finally kill off the Keystone Pipeline. And I just wonder how that's going to set the tone going forward. Doug, we've got to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your time today. Greatly appreciated. Doug Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum President. What do we got?